that's so brilliantly framed. And I think, this is that all put together, that's really, it pierces the argument. If the argument was ever meant to be taken seriously in the first place, I feel like a lot of this um, is a holding pattern. It's just kind of creating distraction while the powerful people in this country extract as many resources as possible before they set all of it on fire. But to the extent we're having a serious conversation, I think you just kind of captured it perfectly. On the one hand, it is not only illogical but silly to say that history is not important, because history is literally everything that happened just before this moment in time. So you're not having an adult conversation with us. You're taking an idea, using a kind of cartoon version of it, and saying at some random interval that I, white man with some kind of position of authority, will determine from this point backwards, that stuff won't matter. I promise you, if I smash that man's windshield while he's having that interview and he walks outside and it's smashed, if I say to him, it's cool, it's the end of history. So that it doesn't matter I smashed your windshield. It's all the present tense. He's going to call the police on me because history is relative to his interpretation of it. History matters if that dude has tenure. I do not know if he does or doesn't. But let's say whatever little community college he runs his mouth at for money has given him tenure, and you say, sorry, dude, we thought maybe social justice should be taught by people who know something about social justice based on their own experience. He won't want to hear your tenure doesn't matter anymore. He'll be like, I got tenure 5 years ago. So history does matter to everybody very much. That argument is just silly, but it's exactly, I think, as you're explaining it, Sam, it's like it's the wrong target. I think it's the wrong target on purpose. I think it's intended to be a distraction, and I believe I think the thesis is strong that you're like, this is about the white people. They don't know what to do when the black people are radicalized, so they're just not going to worry about that right now, because really all they need is for elections to keep going the way they're going long enough for there to be nothing left of the American culture. And whatever happens after that is not their interest or problem. They don't, they're not thinking any further ahead than that. They'll be very happy to turn over the whole country to black folks once they've destroyed it. Once it's literally the entire country's burning instead of 20 or 25% of it, which is basically what's happening now, then they'll be like, you're right. We believe in justice as well. Take this steaming pile of dog shit and we're equal. We're all fair and square. We're going to be in the Caribbean. We're going to extract some more resources from someone else. You look at the pattern, and that's what it is. What's offensive about this kind of stuff is they present it as if they care about social justice, as if they care about people. The conversation we need to have is, why doesn't the left recognize its own sociopathology? Why do white people who think that they are progressive and left-leaning, not recognize that they are not capable of the emotional imagination that's required to be just a basic human being? And if you can't do that, if I can't see somebody stub their toe and part of my brain says, that hurts when that happens, when I stub my toe, I can imagine what that's like. If you've lost that ability, if you're always kind of jostling people when you're walking down the street, and even your little stuff indicates, if your kids are like robots, if you have no relationship with any of your family members, you need to work on that stuff and stop acting like you have a theory of the world that's going to help anybody else. And I think that's really where these people need to be. They don't need to be on YouTube. They need to be in therapy, and they need to stop talking like they know anything when they can very comfortably sit back and say all of the pain that other people have suffered is really unimportant. And they are all nodding at each other and saying, ooh, very deep, very interesting. It's a lot of bull. They're crazy. They need a re-education camp, and they better be careful because they're going to get it. What's going to happen is, Sam, like you're saying, what happens when you radicalize the black folks, you don't need to be in the majority to be in power. And 18, 19% of a population is plenty to take over. What are you going to do?
All you need is 3% for a revolution. There's
That's all you
articles,
need.
papers have been written, 3%.
If
And on
Doc was
top of
here, I'm
that,
sure he'd agree with you.
another way for us to be radical is y'all can't win a revolution without Negroes. All Negroes got to do is stay home and serve the
You
new
see?
master. Because both right now, the left is racist and the right is racist. So
And
at the
I'll
end
tell
of the
you,
day, they both
right.
hate us. So why do we care which new master we serve? We've been doing that shit
I've
in this country for hundreds of years. Fuck them.
I've never heard the kind of focused conversation on among black folks as I'm hearing now in terms of like why not conservatism? Why not just go with the Republicans for a generation and see what happens? It's always been there, and there's always been conservative black folks, of course. But we're talking about electoral politics, and I think, more than ever, I think there's folks that are like, why wouldn't we? What's the argument
So
against?
so
And so,
I'm
yeah,
not there yet, but I see a lot of people leaning right. I think
I do
2024,
too.
y'all better watch out for the blacks. Like people were having a fit when they lied and said, hold on, let me turn on my camera. People were
No,
having a fit when they lied and said that black people went 10% per Trump. We were still under the double digits, and that includes non-black American descendants of chattel slavery. A lot of foreign blacks are Republicans. What they gonna do when descendants of chattel slavery go right? And that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that's the answer because they're racist too, but both
right.
sides are fucking up and neither side is serving us. And a lot of people just want to see this shit burn down. I don't want to see it burn down. I would like to see a good world for everybody else and my children. Like I would. Like I would like to see the people I care about make it through the Hunger Games. I would like for there not to be a Hunger Game. But this shit right here, the way this shit's going, like lower income white people, poor white people, these middle class and upper class whites are leading you to your destruction. That's that's a good word. I
You
have to choose my
gotta
words carefully. Whew, let's get
you
back to
gotta
this
deal with the
video because we
pathology.
ain't even got through 5 minutes. Let's go. Let's get back to the video. We'll come back around because they keep saying shit. So, whew. All right, let's go.
The things you're talking about with Teray and the New Deal, totally, it's completely useful to have people stop saying things which are false, especially if those things that they're saying that are false are helping them make their points. So even I, as anti-historicist as I've become, am not. I mean, I am going around saying, Marx should have said, wasn't enough to say, if the philosophers have only understood the world, the point of
What is false that people are saying about the New Deal? The New Deal was racist. It was set up to carve out black people. Yes, some poor whites got fucked up in the process, but like my white lady friend Edie, who y'all have heard on here come on the show plenty of times, explained to me her family member who got excluded because of farm work went and was able to get a white job with the New Deal program and still get the benefits. So those white farmers were able to move into other programs. They didn't have to stay farmers. They could quit being farmers and go do something else in the New Deal and get those fucking benefits. Black people couldn't do that shit. So quit fucking playing
I
us.
mean, yeah, that's the whole thing. Um, they want to act like just because people don't sit there and give like very nuanced details in describing how we were locked out, that means that we weren't exactly locked out because the government didn't specifically say black people can't get these benefits. And it's bullshit because they know, like, when a program is set up to disproportionately hurt us, is they understand that concept, because they make the same argument, but in the inverse when they talk about the universal programs disproportionately benefiting us.
That's right.
So, like, this is just bullshit.
Facts. Like, facts. Anybody else before we get back? I know I stopped it kind of soon, but I just get so tired of that. And like, what's frustrating for me is like, my friend Edie is a big New Dealer. She completely believes in the New Deal, and all she says is, Sam, I would like the New Deal without the racism. Why can't y'all just say that?
Right. Just admit it. I mean, there's documentation where Southern congressmen were like, I'm not agreeing to this until you prevent these jobs that overwhelmingly are done by black folks to be separated out from the New Deal. Like they were like, we're cool with it if you make sure black folks don't benefit from
It seems to me, concessions to or dealings with the Congress, the legislature, which was dominated by racist Democrats from the South.
Now, on the eve of the inauguration, the month before, in February 1933, Walter Lippmann, the most important columnist in the country, wrote 7 columns in the Herald Tribune in which he counseled President Roosevelt that it would be necessary to suspend Congress if the emergency of the collapse of the economy were to be addressed. And the last few paragraphs of the great inaugural speech, the one in which the president told us we had nothing to fear but fear itself, the end of that speech, the president said, I will ask the Congress to do A, B, and C, and if they do not, I will ask for the one remaining capacity that I will need, the right to rule by executive power. But he never did that. The country never had that happen. Executive capacity grew, but it did not bypass Congress. Even the 100 days, the great legislative torrent that set the country on a new path in the first period of the Roosevelt presidency, occurred in the Congress, and the Congress often inserted items in that legislation the president himself did not want. We never lost that centrality of the legislature, but ironies on top of ironies involved in the story. As you note, the Democratic Party was a strange bedfellows institution. Northern liberals like Robert Wagner of New York, Southern racists like Theodore Bilbo of Mississippi. And after 1938, a majority of Democrats in Congress were from the 17 states in the Union that practiced mandatory racial segregation. So one of the questions I placed front and center in the book was, well, what difference did that make? We kept legislative government. We kept lawmaking. We kept democracy. But we did so in a Faustian bargain that linked modern American democracy and its remaking to the least liberal, least democratic part of the American polity.
Because of legislature, shall I call it supremacy, or because in your own thinking, we happily enough did not find Franklin Roosevelt executing or calling upon those final supreme presidential powers?
It's such a complex matter and fascinating. Lawmaking occurs through a complex process in the legislature. The masters of that process were Southern Democrats. Why? They came from a one-party system. They didn't have opposition. They had great seniority. They had massive experience. They often occupied the central leadership posts. The president, in going to Congress, in submitting legislation to Congress, in not doing what Lippmann had proposed, suspending Congress, had no choice but to work within the legislature in a manner as dictated by the leaders of congressional committees, the Speaker of the House, the Majority Leader, and the full complement of Southerners in the House and the Senate who truly dominated the institution. And in consequence, nothing could pass into law against their opposition in the 1930s and 1940s. And after 38, when they constituted a majority of the party, I go so far as to claim that everything that passed into law mapped almost precisely onto the preferences of the American South. But these white Southern representatives were not conservatives in the sense of today's conservatives. They came from a dirt poor region. They liked the New Deal. Bilbo, the leading racist in the Senate, campaigned as a 100% New Dealer. But all that depended on keeping race off the national agenda and of making sure that the South maintained its autonomy in matters of race.
You make certain that the reader knows that FDR was aware of this.
Yes.
And that FDR was aware of what you call the Faustian bargain. And that even in the matter of an anti-lynching bill, he would not speak up for it because of what that would have done to his support in the South.
I think that's quite correct. President Roosevelt, unlike his wife, was, one might say, indifferent to these questions. He wasn't
Indifferent?
Indifferent. He wasn't a racist, although he spent a lot of time in the South, but indifferent in the sense that it wasn't high on his priorities to crusade to try to change the racial order.
But now, wait a minute. What I get from
Yes.
from reading your book is that he had no option. If he were to be successful in his New Deal legislation, and then most importantly, later in his war activities, he was going to had no choice but to go along with the South.
No, that's quite right. Your reading is an accurate reading of the book. He had no choice, but sometimes we find ourselves in circumstances of no choice, and we deeply regret and resent not having had the choice. In the case of President Roosevelt, I don't think he saw it quite that way. Eleanor did, but not Franklin.
Why do you say that?
Well,
You take no pleasure in saying that.
no, I
trust.
take absolutely no pleasure. I think in that manner, I don't even mean it. Of course, it's retrospectively a critical comment, but it's a critical comment on the much wider milieu of American politics and society at that moment. I think it was true that the majority, great majority of Northern, non-Southern political actors in Congress, in the executive branch, and elsewhere, not all, but almost all, took the Southern system as if a fact of nature. It's the way it was. Even a Republican president, William Howard Taft in 1909, in the midst of one of the most boring inaugural addresses in American history, spoke in the middle paragraphs that leap off the page when one reads it to explain how it's no longer the business of the federal government to be concerned with Southern race relations. This matter is now settled. And he spoke at just the moment when the Southern states had completed their legal regime that came to be called Jim Crow. And Franklin Roosevelt grew up within that world. Both major parties at the time thought that race was not legitimately on the agenda of the federal government.
You know, as someone who grew up then, and I concede that FDR was my hero.
And mine.
Well, you're a lot younger. I lived through Bilbo. He was very real to me and to the other racists. I find it very difficult to really to wrap myself around your description of FDR.
I think FDR was appalled, as many Southerners were appalled, by the Bilbos, who were the rhetorical racists, who spoke of mongrelization, who not only spoke in the most despicable terms about African Americans, but about Jews and other minorities. They were shameless in their speech. Many Southerners, most Southern representatives in Congress, were appalled and ashamed at that level of speech. But as one, the Southern members of Congress, including the most liberal, like one of my heroes, Claude Pepper of Florida, never, not once, spoke against segregation. Indeed, in 1948, when President Truman so courageously desegregated the military, Pepper spoke to his constituents and said, don't misunderstand, the President of the United States is not in favor of ending segregation in daily life in the South. So this was the normal character of speech and expectations in American life. And one could really find very, very few political leaders who were sufficiently angered and appalled to lead any kind of effort or crusade against it.
Tell me, it must occur to many people reading Fear Itself, there is some connection that you might draw between FDR and the Southern Democrats and his relations with them, and President Obama and the Tea Party and present Republicans?
Well, analogies are tricky across time.
Okay, fair enough.
You began by asking about a description of whether I think like a political scientist, and now I want to assert I'm thinking like a historian, and thinking about differences and similarities, but also the differences. The Tea Party would not exist if not for the most radical change in recent American politics, the shift of the South from Democratic to Republican. But in that shift, there was a movement away from a majority of Southern members of Congress and political leaders being, in some sense, liberals. Liberals in terms of social and economic policy, pro-Social Security. Southerners voted for the Wagner Act. Southerners voted for the National Industrial Recovery Act, for a stronger and larger federal government, for more taxes and redistribution. The South was dirt poor. They were not conservatives in the same sense that an anti-government Tea Party is, with one big exception. By the 1940s, the Southern members of Congress had figured out that if a national labor movement grew strong, the racial order of the South might collapse. And the moment the Southerners departed from the consensus of the Democratic Party was the moment they realized that they must act with Republicans to limit the capacities of organized labor. And the key moment of that came in 1947 with the passage of the Taft-Hartley Act, two Republicans writing that act with nearly unanimous Southern Democratic support against the veto, overturning the veto of President Truman. And that's the moment where a kind of Tea Party shift begins to occur. But today, of course, President Obama faces not a circumstance of members of his own party resisting some features of his politics, but the other party in a system of divided government. Whereas with the exception of 2 years, in the 20-year period of Roosevelt and Truman, there were significant Democratic Party majorities. But then, in effect, we had a three-party system.
Indeed.
Northern Democrats, Southern Democrats, and Republicans. And the outcome in issue after issue, including matters of foreign policy and war and peace, often to the good as well as not just to the bad, depended on the decisions taken by the segregationist wing of the Democrats.
So for those people who want to read the book, nobody's saying don't do the New Deal. We're saying do the New Deal without the racism. We're saying that's still not reparations. You still got to pay reparations. This is my thing, right? Why are you white leftists pitting universal programs against you paying for 3 genocides that you owe to Black Americans? Why are they mutually exclusive? Why is it that you can't pay my debt and take care of your people, but at the same time you keep telling me that MMT is the thing that can save us all, but it just doesn't work for Black people? I don't understand this. Help me understand, because I'm just a stupid bitch with a culinary degree. So help me understand, because all these academics, no, for real, I'm just an ex video girl with a fucking culinary degree. You know, go fucking make some food. I know shit about shit. I just used to read 60 books a year. But that still doesn't make me anybody, because I don't have a blue check and I don't have a PhD. So explain it to the dummy. Speak dummy for me to make this make sense. How you gonna give me the same shit as everybody else, but my people are poorer than anybody else? So we the poorest of the poor, but you're gonna give us all the same, but you still not gonna give me enough to be good. Fuck you. Like y'all ain't even giving us enough to even think about selling out for reparations. That's the gag, right? Like y'all ain't even brought nothing to the table for niggas to be like, well, we could use reparations, but like everything you talking about, we still gonna be poor. So we like, well, y'all suffering, y'all can't feed y'all babies, y'all shit fucked up. Yeah, sounds about good to us. Come on, welcome to the bottom. Go ahead. Anything else?
Yeah, like it's just the only time we get class collaboration amongst the America's whites is for racist purposes. That's the only time America's whites come together. It's the only thing they care about that much. So like when it comes to these whole like white people leading the left. Like, you can't do it without us. And it's not because we are like so much more savvy than you politically. It's because when you guys gather together, the only thing you can do is oppress other people.
Right.
Think about it. Like an Italian guy, a white
Right.
South African guy. What are y'all gonna talk about? What do y'all have? What do y'all have in common? Y'all have nothing. Y'all are not the same people. Y'all are not even genetically similar. No more genetically similar than you would be to me.